I asked GPT to tell me what are the 7 things that are not so well known that I should know before moving to Kansas City. I have the list right here and I'm going to go through it. I'm going to read you word for word exactly what GPT said about these things. And then I'm going to give you my take as somebody that lives here. So let's just go ahead and jump into it. This first one that they listed was about traffic concerns. It says, while Kansas City is not as congested as some larger cities, traffic congestion can still be an issue during peak hours. Consider commuting times and traffic patterns, especially if you plan to rely on personal transportation. Yeah, we get traffic congestion here just like every other city. We have tons of highways. There are a few routes that get more congested than others. So I'm constantly taking I-35 through the downtown loop, and that's one of the worst areas in terms of traffic congestion in the entire city. Another area that's highly congested during peak hours is 435 on the south side of the loop. Whether you're going east or west, it's a wide highway, so you have 4 or 5 lanes and a lot of spaces, but there is heavy traffic down there. So again, these are just things that you want to keep in mind if you're considering a move to Kansas City. Where are you going to be working? What's your route going to be every single day to work? And that's something that we can definitely help with. And by the way, my name's Kyle. I'm a licensed real estate agent here in Kansas City, and we help people move here every single day. And if you're considering a move to Kansas City, then be sure to download our free relocation guide in the description below. All right, so this next one, GPT is talking about public transportation limitations. The public transportation options are available, but the system is not as extensive as in some larger cities. Depending on your location, you may find limited public transportation options, which could impact your daily commute. Now, listen, I've talked about public transportation a whole lot on my channel. We have a streetcar here. It's getting extended 3.5 miles to the south, but it only runs north and south from the River Market down to the Country Club Plaza in UMKC, which is where the southern anchor for the stop is going to be. Outside of that, we have bus routes all over the city, but the majority of those are really focused on South Kansas City. And by the way, the streetcar and the bus are completely free, which is an awesome thing about our public transportation here in Kansas City. However, it is very limited. Now, we also have something called Iris, which is essentially like Uber, but it's just local here to KC, and it's very affordable. So that's another option for public transportation. But outside of that, there's really not much, especially if you're going to live in the suburbs. There's hardly anything for public transportation outside of the urban core of Kansas City. So if you're moving here, that's just something you want to make note of, is that you're going to be very car reliant. So again, that's why location is very important when you're considering a move to Kansas City. Typically, you want to live closer to where you work, so you're shortening that commute time and then being closer to the amenities. Like Trader Joe's, for instance, is my favorite store to shop at. There are only 2 locations in South KC. Believe it or not, I bought a house to be close to Trader Joe's, and stuff like that matters. So again, these are just all things to factor in when you're considering a move to Kansas City. And a location, Kansas, Missouri side, how close are you going to be to your favorite shopping and amenities? All right, so GPT is going deep on these next 2 topics. So number 3 on the list is education disparities. While there are reputable schools and universities in Kansas City, some neighborhoods may face challenges in terms of education quality. Researching local school districts is crucial if you have school-age children. Now, listen, I grew up in the suburbs of Kansas City on the Kansas side. I went to what is considered a top-rated school district, and I still struggled at school because the class sizes were really big and it didn't really fit my learning style. So I think there are challenges no matter where you go to school. And this is why, as a parent, it's super important to just know what kind of environment your child thrives in. And once you know that, you can really find a school that meets the needs of your child, whether it's on the Kansas or Missouri side. Now, I will say that traditionally, what has happened here in Kansas City, because we have a Kansas and Missouri, it's kind of unique in that way, where we have really great public schools according to the rankings on the Kansas side, whereas Missouri and Kansas City, Missouri especially, just like many urban areas, has struggled. We just got reaccredited last year. Both of my kids are in public schools here in Kansas City, Missouri, but there have been some challenges along the way. But what's happened traditionally is young people move to Kansas City, Missouri. They love that hip lifestyle and being in a walkable neighborhood and close to all the amenities, and then they have kids. And they look around at the rankings for the schools, and Kansas has highly rated public schools and Missouri doesn't. And so they uproot their lives and they move over to the Kansas side. Now, I do see less and less of that happening. I see more families with children that are advocating for better schools here in Kansas City. And I really think that's what it's going to take to turn the school district around. And a lot of this comes down to, doing your research and talking to other parents. So definitely reach out. I can get you connected within that community. And watch this video here where I interviewed Danielle Dispenza with Show Me KC Schools, and she provides awesome insight about navigating the school system here in Kansas City. Next on the list, ChatGPT is not holding back with economic disparities. Like many cities, Kansas City has economic disparities, with some neighborhoods facing higher poverty rates and lower income levels. Be aware of the socioeconomic diversity in different areas of the city. So this is a touchy subject, but all you really need to do is research J.C. Nichols and the redlining that took place around the development of the Country Club District in the early 1900s. There is a deep-rooted history of segregation and redlining here in Kansas City, just like many other cities, but it still exists today. Unfortunately, all you have to do is drive around and you'll be on one side of the street where you have well-manicured lawns and wealthy neighborhoods, and then on the other side of the street, you have blighted areas and abandoned properties that are boarded up. Now, I do see the city stepping in to provide grants and funding to really try and bring up these areas that have been divested in for years. In fact, part of this big package in the Emerging Projects Agreement that Mayor Quentin Lucas just signed with the Department of Transportation has set aside funding for reconnecting the east side of Kansas City that had highways built right through communities and entire neighborhoods demolished and families displaced years ago that we're still feeling the impacts of today. So I am hopeful that change is taking place here in Kansas City, but we really have to, as a community, come together and make it a better place for not just our own neighborhood, but for everybody in Kansas City. Number 5 on the list, we have weather extremes, and they're talking specifically about the 4-season climate here is appreciated by many. The weather can be extreme. Summers can be hot and humid, while winters may bring cold temperatures and occasional snowfall. Be prepared for temperature variations. Now, I recently released a video on the weather here specifically if you want the entire scoop on what the 4 seasons are like here in Kansas City, but I do have to agree with this. We get some very extreme weather throughout the year, and it was one of the things that I actually was dreading when I moved back from Denver, because Denver is the opposite of humid. It is so dry, and in the winter, it's too dry. But in the summer, you get that nice dry heat. You're not sweating and feeling like you got to shower again as soon as you step out your door. Whereas here in Kansas City, that is not the case. I mean, we get a lot of days with 60, 70, 80% humidity, and it is brutal. And then on the opposite end of that, it is very, very cold here in the winter. We actually just got our first snowfall on November 26th, just a few days after Thanksgiving. It came early this year. We don't get that much snow, actually. It's more freezing rain, which is almost worse. But regardless, you're going to need to layer up. You're going to need a whole different variation of clothing for your wardrobe if you're considering moving to Kansas City, because yes, we do experience all 4 seasons and even the extreme ends of some of those seasons. Once again, ChatGPT is coming in with back-to-back on the weather. So this next one is potential for severe weather. So this is why I didn't spend too much time on the spring, because they're talking about specifically tornadoes are a possibility in the region, especially during spring and early summer. It's essential to be familiar with emergency procedures and have a plan in place in case severe weather occurs. Now listen, we have basements in almost every single house in Kansas City. There are a few houses that are on slabs, but for the most part, I would say 95% of homes in the Midwest even. It's probably not just a Kansas City thing, but the Midwest, we have basements here because we get tornadoes. Now, in terms of where those tornadoes actually take place, hardly ever do we experience them within Kansas City. So the actual city of Kansas City, you do see them more in the rural areas. Now, we did have one that just came through a couple of summers ago. It was a very small guy, a little small tornado. They're still scary. I mean, we went down to the basement and took our kids, and that's part of the experience of living in the Midwest is you get these tornado siren drills every first Wednesday of the month. In fact, I have a Siberian Husky, and every first Wednesday of the month, if he's outside and those tornado sirens kick on, he starts howling. And it's pretty amazing. So Kansas City doesn't really get a ton of tornado activity, but we get very heavy rain and thunderstorms here. But I remember when I was younger, Joplin got hit with a massive tornado and there were several fatalities. And I remember being terrified as a kid. I was like, man, I hope that never happens to me. However, I think I would prefer the occasional tornado over, say, like a hurricane and mass flooding like you see in other parts of the country, but maybe that's just me. All right, we made it to the end, number 7 on the list. Before we get to it, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a video about all things KC. And the last one, ChatGPT, is talking about the limited walkability in some areas. While certain neighborhoods offer a walkable environment, others may lack pedestrian-friendly infrastructure. This can impact your ability to walk to amenities or enjoy a stroll in your neighborhood. I don't know that it'll prevent you from enjoying a stroll in your neighborhood. I mean, almost every neighborhood has sidewalks and, places that you can walk. There are usually some parks in close proximity. But in terms of walkability, the way that I think about walkability is just being able to walk up to a store or a grocery store and, grab a coffee or, an ingredient for a meal that you're cooking. And that is exactly why we moved to Brookside when we relocated back to Kansas City from Denver, because I had never experienced that. I grew up in the suburbs of Kansas City where everything is super sprawled out. And I mean, I grew up in Olathe, Kansas, and I kid you not, it took me 15-20 minutes on my skateboard to get from one side of Olathe to the other side where my friends lived, and it was miserable, especially in the summer when it's super humid, or in the winter when it's frigid cold. There were a couple of times where I was trying to ride my bike through the snow, and I abandoned my bike because I couldn't make it. The snow was too deep. So if that's important to you, walkability was definitely important to me when I moved back to Kansas City. That's something that I really saw out because I don't want to spend as much time driving in my car, and I absolutely love it. I love being able to walk to places, but that's not for everybody, and there aren't many places like that in Kansas City. You have to be very intentional about seeking those out, which is why people reach out to us, because we know all the areas in Kansas City. So if you're considering a move here, well, we would love to help you. So shoot us an email at info@movingtokc.net and download our free relocation guide in the description below. But if you can endure these 7 things and you're still thinking about moving to Kansas City, but you're a little torn between North Kansas City or South Kansas City, well, I have a video right here that you need to watch on the differences between North and South KC.